In the pre-dawn hours of November 29, 1944, a periscope, barely breaking the surface, brought into focus an impossible sight. A warship, vast enough to span 3 football fields, swung her massive side into view, just over a mile distant. For the man peering through the lens, this moment carried the weight of a professional life thus far defined by absence, not achievement. His previous command had ended in a textbook failure, as superiors had described it, when a priority target, the carrier Shokaku, slipped past without a shot fired. The sting of that missed opportunity had compelled him to request relief, leading to nearly a year processing reports and coordinating logistics, a backdesk assignment that often signaled the end of a submarine officer's career. Yet this situation, unfolding before him now, was a second chance. The submarine he commanded, Archer Fish, a Belau-class boat, had herself returned from 4 patrols with little to show for her efforts. The opportunity had been granted to Joseph Enright, a Naval Academy graduate from the class of 1933. His first submarine command, the newly constructed USS Dace, had seemed a dream assignment, a fresh vessel with an experienced crew, bound for the most contested waters in the Pacific. Departing New London in September of 1943, Dace transited the Panama Canal, arriving in Pearl Harbor on October 3rd. Just 2 weeks later, patrol orders placed them off the southeast coast of Honshu, near Nagoya, an area known for merchant traffic. The patrol began with a glimpse of success. On November 7th, a large, unescorted freighter appeared. The submarine maneuvered for attack, firing 4 torpedoes. 3 found their mark, tearing into the hull, but before a finishing blow could be delivered, Japanese patrol craft materialized, forcing Dace to dive deep, evading their destructive pursuit. Surfacing later, only an oil slick and debris remained. Intelligence later confirmed the freighter had limped back to port, its damage repaired, its sinking unconfirmed. No credit was given. This initial partial success, then denial, set a precedent for the mounting frustration. Then came word, relayed through ultra-intelligence, a stream of critical information derived from broken Japanese codes. An aircraft carrier, Shokaku, was departing Yokosuka, heading south. This vessel was no ordinary target. She had participated in the attack on Pearl Harbor and nearly every major carrier engagement of the war. Her destruction would represent a significant blow. The commander quickly calculated her trajectory, placing her within his patrol area in less than half a day. He positioned Dace along the predicted path, waiting at periscope depth, scanning the horizon. Dawn broke with no sign of the carrier. Hours passed, the tension inside the boat rising with the sun. At 8:30, lookouts sighted a large warship. The silhouette matched Shokaku. An approach began, following standard doctrine. Sprint ahead, submerge, then wait for the target to close. The submarine briefly surfaced to gain speed, moved to the carrier's projected course, then went deep. But the massive ship failed to appear where anticipated. Shokaku had altered course, a 30-degree turn to port, shifting her track to pass 3,000 yards to the east, too far for an effective torpedo shot. 2 options remained: surface, reposition, and try again, risking detection in daylight, or fire a long-range shot with minimal chance of success. He chose to surface, pushing Dace to flank speed, racing to regain a firing position. The light grew stronger, each passing minute increasing the risk of discovery by the carrier's lookouts or its destroyer escorts. The decision was made. The attack was aborted. Dace dove, leaving Shokaku to steam past, unaware she had been hunted for 3 hours. The patrol continued for 3 more weeks, fruitlessly. A tanker was sighted, but once again, Japanese escorts intervened, driving Dace deep under a rain of depth charges. No damage was inflicted. Returning to Midway on December 11th, after 49 days at sea, the tally stood at 0 confirmed sinkings, 1 damaged freighter, and 1 agonizingly missed opportunity against a critical target. The man knew the consequences. Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarine Force Pacific, known for both tactical freedom and unforgiving accountability, would review his report. Rather than await judgment, he drafted a formal request the following day. I was responsible for an unproductive patrol and request to be relieved by an officer who can perform more satisfactorily. Lockwood granted it immediately. He was transferred to administrative duties at the Midway submarine base. The command of Dace passed to another, and under new leadership, the submarine found its success, eventually earning a Presidential Unit Citation. The common consensus was that the problem had been the previous captain. For 6 months, he processed patrol reports, coordinated logistics, and assigned repair schedules, the mundane, career-ending work of a failed commander. Second chances were rare in the submarine force. Qualified officers were abundant. Active boats were not. Failed commanders typically transitioned to surface ships or ashore duty. Their time beneath the waves concluded. But Joseph Enright refused to accept this fate. In June 1944, he secured a meeting with Admiral Lockwood. The brief 15-minute exchange saw Enright argue that his failure with Dace stemmed from an excess of caution, an adherence to doctrine that stifled instinct. He had learned, he claimed, and requested another command. Lockwood, reviewing a record that showed a Naval Academy graduate in the upper third of his class, years of experience on battleships, and 8 years in submarines before the war, saw no major errors apart from the Shokaku incident. He made a decision. A second chance would be granted, but not immediately. Enright remained at Midway until September, when Lockwood summoned him again. Archerfish, the admiral explained, needed a new commanding officer. Her last patrol had yielded nothing. The crew, though experienced, was frustrated, requiring an aggressive leader. Enright accepted the challenge. He assumed command on September 1, 1944. On November 28, 1944, at 20:48 hours, Archerfish was running on the surface 60 miles south of Tokyo Bay. Lifeguard duty for down B-29 bomber crews had been canceled that morning. The hunt was on. Radar picked up a contact. 2 large ships, 12 miles distant, bearing north. The radar returns indicated substantial size. Enright ordered flank speed, moving to intercept. By 2200 hours, visual contact was made. A massive vessel, flanked by 3 destroyer escorts in close formation, appeared. From his binoculars, the initial impression was a tanker, but the silhouette was wrong. Too much superstructure, too much height. This was a warship, possibly a battleship, perhaps a carrier. His executive officer estimated its length at over 800 feet. Whatever it was, it dwarfed any Japanese warship he had yet encountered. The destroyers complicated the approach, executing anti-submarine patterns, forcing the task group into irregular zigzag movements. From 12,000 yards, Archerfish tracked them, calculating speed and heading. The Japanese formation made 20 knots. Archerfish could match that speed, but barely, meaning a straight chase would never close the distance. He had to predict their zigzag and cut the angle. The pursuit intensified at 21:30. All 4 diesel engines were pushed to maximum output, surpassing their rated capacity. The chief engineer warned of risk to the engines, but the commanding officer accepted it. Missing this target was not an option. Below deck, the engine room crew meticulously monitored temperatures, pressures, and fuel consumption. As the diesels roared, their black exhaust invisible in the night, but their sound carried across the water. Archerfish maintained an 8,000-yard distance, close enough to track, far enough to avoid detection. The Japanese ships kept their zigzag, a 30-degree turn every 12 minutes. This precise, predictable pattern allowed Enright to calculate an intercept course. If maintained, the zigzag would bring them within 5,000 yards of Archerfish around 2:30, positioning his submarine ahead for a submerged ambush. This hinged entirely on the pattern remaining consistent. By 22:30, the gap had closed to 10,000 yards. Archerfish, making 20.3 knots to the Japanese 20.0, gained slowly. At this rate, 3 hours until position. Then, at 2300 hours, the Japanese formation turned back northwest, unexpectedly closer. The range dropped to 7,000 yards. Sonar detected propeller sounds, confirming their proximity. Enright ordered silence. At 23:30, the zigzag pattern subtly shifted. Turned still every 12 minutes, but now only 25 degrees, meaning the formation covered more ground with each leg. Enright adjusted his intercept calculations. By midnight, he was 6,000 yards behind, still closing slowly. The chief engineer reported engines approaching maximum safe limits. A brief reduction to 1,700 horsepower was ordered, allowing a cool down, dropping Archerfish to 19.5 knots. The Japanese continued at 20, and the gap began to widen. 7,000, then 8,000 yards. Losing ground, Enright at 0:30 ordered full power again, 1,800 horsepower. Archerfish clawed back, stabilizing the gap, then slowly closing it once more. At 1 o'clock, the Japanese executed another turn, this time southwest, directly away from Archerfish. The geometry worsened immediately. He was now chasing from directly astern, the least favorable position. This pursuit could continue indefinitely, with Archerfish never closing. Options were considered: break off and search for easier targets, radio headquarters for support, or continue the chase, hoping for a beneficial zigzag. This target, he reasoned, was too valuable to abandon. If it was a carrier, as he now believed, its sinking justified every risk. For another hour, the Japanese maintained their southwest course. Archerfish paralleled them at 8,000 yards. Fuel consumption, at flank speed, was 3 times normal. Only 6 hours of this pace remained before a fourth reduction to conserve fuel for the return to base. 6 hours. It was 1:35. By 7:30, he would have to disengage or risk being stranded. Then, at 2 o'clock, the Japanese zigzagged again, turning northwest, back towards their original track. The geometry improved instantly. Archerfish was now 7,000 yards behind and slightly to port. Another 30 minutes on this course, and he would be ahead. At 2:30, a recalculation showed them 6,000 yards behind, but crucially ahead of the target's base course. If the Japanese turned southwest again, they would pass within 5,000 yards. Time to prepare for the submerged attack. He briefed his officers. When they turn southwest, we submerge. Position ourselves across their track. Wait for them to close. Fire all 6 bow tubes. One spread, all torpedoes. This target is too big to waste shots. Everything. The officers understood the gravity of the plan. This was the culmination of 2 months of training. At 2:56, the Japanese formation turned southwest. The geometry was perfect. Dive. Archerfish slipped below the surface, quietly, smoothly. Ballast tanks flooded. 2. Periscope depth. 60 feet down, the periscope briefly surfaced. The Japanese formation, 7,000 yards away, closing at 20 knots. 17 minutes to contact. He lowered the periscope. No need to risk a wake. Rigged for silent running. Ventilation fans off, machinery isolated, only the hum of electric motors and the breathing of 81 men. At 3 o'clock, a quick periscope peek. 5,000 yards. The massive ship was clearly visible now. Flight deck. Island superstructure. A carrier, unmistakably. He noted details. Length, beam, superstructure configuration. Critical for intelligence analysis. He lowered the scope. He had tracked that precise zigzag pattern for 3 hours. The turns, every 12 minutes, alternating 30 degrees left and right, were predictable. Fatal. At 2 o'clock, still too far for a submerged strike, he had kept Archerfish on the surface, engines straining, diesel smoke vanishing into the night. Japanese lookouts would be watching ahead, not behind. His tactic and end-around would only succeed if they zigged at the wrong moment. And they did. At 2:56, the Japanese formation turned southwest, directly into his path. He was now 5,000 yards ahead. Dive. Archerfish slid beneath the waves. Silent running. Every man knew his role, each movement precise, muted. Japanese destroyers had sonar. A single active ping would betray their position. Through the periscope, the approaching warship filled the lens, dwarfing anything in the recognition manuals. Flight deck, massive hull, an unknown carrier. He sketched details on a notepad for naval intelligence. At 3:04, the realization struck. The carrier would pass north, not exposing her broadside. A bow or stern shot on a vessel this size required impossible luck. He trusted geometry. At 3:12, the carrier turned south, a 30-degree course change. The zigzag continued, but this put her on a collision course. Perfect geometry. Final approach. Archerfish crept forward at 2 knots. Range closed, 2,000, 1,500, 1,200 yards. The destroyers, a screen 300 yards ahead, mandated immediate action. 1,400 yards. He locked in his firing solution. All 6 forward torpedo tubes prepared. Torpedoes set for a shallow 10-foot depth, against doctrine. Standard procedure called for 15 to 20 feet to explode beneath the waterline. But a carrier this size, he reasoned, would have anti-torpedo bulges, armored compartments. He wanted hits above them, where the plating was thinner. If they ran deep, they would still hit below. If true, they would punch holes at 10 feet. Either way, flooding. Tube 1 fire. 8 seconds. Tube 2 fire. Another 8. Tube 3 fire. He continued the sequence. 4, 5, 6 fire. 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 6 torpedoes ran true. His eye pressed to the periscope. 45 seconds to impact. The first torpedo struck the starboard side amidships at 3:17. A massive fireball. A deep, booming crack, reverberating through Archerfish's hull. 8 seconds later, the second hit. Another fireball, another explosion. The crew cheered. He watched as the third hit near the stern, the fourth forward of amidships. For confirmed hits, the fifth and sixth he didn't see detonate, perhaps missing or running underneath. There was no time to confirm. The destroyers were already turning, their wakes indicating their target. Depth charges were coming. Dive to 400 feet. Archerfish plunged, venting ballast, tanks flooding, descending rapidly. 400 feet approached her crush depth, pushing the design limits of a Belau-class submarine. He gambled on the Japanese setting their charges for shallower depths. At 3:23, Archerfish reached 400 feet. The crew rigged for silent running. No movement, no talking, only the essential systems. They waited in darkness. The first depth charge detonated at 3:26, distant at least 500 yards away. The destroyers were attacking the submarine's predicted position, not its actual location. 13 more charges followed over the next 12 minutes, none close. The Japanese were guessing, dropping patterns over the torpedo track's origin. But Archerfish had moved, gone deep, her swift evasion saving her. At 3:47, the depth charge attack ceased. Contact was lost. For another hour, Archerfish remained at 400 feet. Through hydrophones, he listened. The carrier's engines were silent. Sounds of destruction began. Loud metallic groaning, cracking, bulkheads collapsing, compartments flooding. The carrier was dying. 47 minutes of breaking up noises, timed precisely by the sonar operator, until silence. The commander recorded the time of sinking as 4:34. He was wrong. The carrier was still afloat, but at 400 feet, without visual confirmation, he had only sound to guide him. At 5 o'clock, he brought Archerfish to periscope depth. Cautiously, the destroyers could still be hunting. A 3-second sweep. No contacts, no destroyers, no carrier, no wreckage. Empty ocean. He lowered the scope and descended to 200 feet, setting a course south. Away from Tokyo Bay, Archerfish had survived. The outcome for the carrier remained a mystery that only patrol reports and naval intelligence could resolve. He estimated his target as a Hayataka-class carrier, about 28,000 tons. Again, he was wrong. The carrier displaced 72,000 tons, and at 5 o'clock, when he raised his periscope, she was still steaming south at 18 knots, for torpedo holes flooding her hull. The Japanese called her Shinano, a name for the longest river, a designation for capital ships of strategic importance. She had begun as a battleship, the third of the colossal Yamato class, laid down in May 1940. These are the most powerful warships ever built, 72,000 tons, 18-inch guns, armor designed to withstand any weapon. Japan intended 5 such behemoths, but only Yamato and Musashi were completed as battleships. Hull number 110 sat incomplete at Yokosuka when the Battle of Midway concluded in June 1942, leaving Japan with a critical shortage of fleet carriers. Building new carriers took years. A proposal to convert the battleship hull into an aircraft carrier offered a faster solution, though still requiring 2 years of work. The armored belt remained, the hull structure unchanged, resulting in a carrier built on a battleship's foundation, theoretically combining carrier striking power with battleship survivability. Construction proceeded in absolute secrecy through 1943 and 1944. Shinano's slip was covered with camouflage netting, though American reconnaissance flights regularly photographed Yokosuka. U.S. intelligence knew something large was being built, but not what. On November 1, 1944, a B-29 bomber photographed Shinano during sea trials. The resulting images showed a carrier of unknown class, its silhouette matching no known Japanese vessel. It was added to the list of unidentified targets, its true size and capabilities unknown. Shinano was commissioned on November 19, 1944, under Captain Toshio Abe. The ceremony was brief. The ship was far from combat-ready. Watertight doors were missing, pumps incomplete, and most of the crew inexperienced. Abe requested 2 more months for fitting out and training, but his request was denied. American B-29 raids on Tokyo were intensifying, making Shinano vulnerable at Yokosuka. She had to move to Kure Naval Base in the Inland Sea, where she could complete fitting out under greater protection. The 300-mile voyage to Kure, approximately 17 hours at cruising speed, was deemed urgent. Abe requested better weather and more escorts, but was ordered to depart immediately with whatever was available. 3 destroyers were assigned: Isokase, Yukikase, and Hamikase. Good ships, experienced crews, but critically insufficient for a carrier of Shinano's size. Abe's protests were overruled. Shinano departed Yokosuka at 13:30 on November 28, 1944. Her cargo holds contained 50 Oka rocket bombs, destined for kamikaze bases. 6 Shinyo suicide boats were lashed to her flight deck. Her hangar bays were empty. She carried no operational aircraft. She was a ferry, not yet a fighting ship. The task group cleared Tokyo Bay at 18:30, setting course southwest for Kure. Abe ordered a standard anti-submarine zigzag pattern, 30-degree turns every 12 minutes. American submarines were known to be active. His intelligence brief listed 3 confirmed contacts in the past week, one of which was Archerfish. At 20:48, Shinano's radar detected a surface contact 12 miles south. Abe assumed an American submarine and ordered a course change to avoid it. The task group turned southwest. The radar contact, however, paralleled their course, maintaining distance but not closing. Abe believed he faced a wolf pack, multiple submarines coordinating an attack. Doctrine dictated evasion, outrunning the submarines. With a 2-knot speed advantage, he believed he could outrun any American submarine on the surface. He ordered flank speed, but engineering countermanded the order. The starboard-outboard propeller shaft bearing was overheating. Continued flank speed risked severe damage. Speed had to be reduced to 18 knots until the bearing cooled. At 23:22, Shinano dropped to 18 knots, the same speed Archerfish could make. The chasing submarine was no longer falling behind. Abe's executive officer suggested launching aircraft to search for submarines, but Shinano carried no operational aircraft. The operations officer recommended searchlights to force any surfacing submarines to dive, but Abe refused, knowing lights would reveal Shinano's position to every submarine within 20 miles. He also refused a request for land-based air cover, fearing radio transmissions would alert American codebreakers. Abe was attempting to slip past through stealth and speed, unaware that stealth was already compromised and speed was no longer an option. At 2:56, Shinano turned southwest, placing Archerfish 5,000 yards directly ahead. Abe's lookouts spotted nothing. Archerfish was already submerged. At 3:15, four torpedoes struck Shinano's starboard side. The first hit near the stern, flooding refrigerated storage and an empty aviation gasoline tank, killing engineering personnel in nearby compartments. The bulkheads held initially, but were not designed for sustained pressure. The second torpedo hit the starboard outboard propeller shaft, the same one that had been overheating. The shaft tunnel flooded instantly, followed by the outboard engine room within 3 minutes. The third torpedo struck boiler room number 3, killing all on watch. The room flooded completely in 2 minutes, its structural failures causing 2 adjacent boiler rooms to flood as well. 3 boiler rooms lost, half of Shinano's power generation gone. The fourth torpedo hit the starboard air compressor room, destroying critical damage control equipment. Anti-aircraft gun magazines nearby flooded. Damage control teams immediately closed watertight doors, activated pumps, and tried to contain the flooding. But the watertight doors were incomplete, gaps remaining between frames and bulkheads. Water poured through. The pumps were insufficient. Additional units had not arrived before Shinano departed Yokosuka. Portable pumps and bucket brigades were deployed, but it was not enough. Abe assessed the damage at 3:30. 4 compartments flooded, 3 boiler rooms lost, multiple leaks through unfinished watertight doors. Shinano was taking on water faster than pumps could remove it. The carrier listed 7 degrees to starboard. Abe had options: counterflood to correct the list, reduce speed to focus on damage control, or attempt to beach the ship 60 miles away. He chose none. He ordered Shinano to maintain maximum speed towards the nearest Japanese naval base, believing speed would reduce the window for further submarine attacks and that the carrier could survive long enough to reach port. He was wrong. Maintaining speed increased water pressure on the damaged hull. Incomplete watertight doors failed, allowing water into undamaged compartments. The list increased to 10 degrees by 4 o'clock and 14 degrees by 5 o'clock. The engineering officer reported to Abe at 5:30. Flooding was uncontrollable. Shinano would sink unless immediate action was taken. Abe ordered counterflooding. It was too late. The list had already exceeded the point where it would be effective. The engineering officer recommended reducing speed to allow damage control teams to shore up bulkheads and seal leaks. Abe agreed. At 6 o'clock, Shinano reduced speed to 12 knots. The list stabilized at 14 degrees. Damage control teams worked through the compartments, but design flaws were fatal. Post-war analysis by American naval engineers revealed critical structural weaknesses at the joint between the waterline armor belt and the underwater anti-torpedo bulge, precisely where the torpedoes struck. One explosion dislodged an I-beam in a flooded boiler room, punching a hole into an adjacent room, creating an unsealable leak. At 7 o'clock, the executive officer reported that the carrier was doomed. The list was increasing despite all efforts. Abe refused this assessment. He ordered all non-essential personnel to the port side of the flight deck, hoping the weight of 1,200 men might counteract the list. It did not. By 8 o'clock, the list reached 18 degrees. Water poured into previously dry spaces. The carrier speed had dropped to 6 knots. The destroyers remained in formation, ready to pick up survivors, but Abe still believed the carrier could be saved. At 9 o'clock, the list reached 25 degrees. Personnel on lower decks could no longer stand. Equipment broke loose, sliding into starboard bulkheads. Abe finally acknowledged reality. He ordered all non-essential personnel to abandon ship. 1,200 sailors and civilian workers moved to the flight deck. Destroyers closed alongside, attempting to take on survivors. The severe list made transfer difficult. Rope ladders were rigged, men descending slowly, carefully. The transfer took 90 minutes. At 10:30, Shinano's list reached 40 degrees. She was rolling on her side. Abe ordered all remaining 800 personnel to abandon ship. They jumped from the flight deck into the water. Destroyers moved in. At 10:57, Shinano capsized and sank 65 miles southeast of Cape Shirano. 1,435 men died. 1,080 were rescued. Captain Abe went down with a ship. Shinano had been commissioned for 10 days. She had steamed approximately 170 miles. She never launched a single aircraft in combat. She never fired her guns at an enemy. For torpedoes from one American submarine ended the largest warship ever built. Joseph Enright knew none of this. Archerfish continued south, clearing the area at standard speed. At 8 o'clock, he surfaced and transmitted a contact report to Pacific Fleet headquarters. Enemy carrier attacked at 3:17 hours. 4 torpedo hits observed. Target believed sunk. He reported his estimated position and a target size of 28,000 tons. He had no frame of reference for a carrier as immense as Shinano. Nothing in his recognition manuals matched what he had seen. Pacific Fleet acknowledged. Naval Intelligence, reviewing Enright's sketches, found no match among known Japanese carrier classes. They assumed he had sunk a merchant conversion, perhaps a tanker adapted to carry aircraft, and 28,000 tons seemed a reasonable estimate for such a vessel. Enright was credited with sinking a Hayataka class carrier, pending post-war confirmation. Archerfish continued her patrol for another 2 weeks without significant targets. On December 8th, an attack on 2 Japanese escort vessels with 4 torpedoes yielded no hits. On December 15th, Archerfish ended her 5th war patrol at Guam, 48 days at sea, with 1 carrier supposedly sunk. Enright filed his report and submitted his sketches. Intelligence analysts remained skeptical. A carrier of that size should have been detected by reconnaissance. Photo interpreters had cataloged every Japanese carrier. None matched Enright's description. His executive officer, lookouts, and sonar man all corroborated the account, confirming 47 minutes of breaking up noises. Yet, without photographic evidence or prisoner confirmation, naval intelligence could not verify the sinking. Enright received credit for an unknown type carrier, estimated at 28,000 tons. He was awarded the Navy Cross. Archerfish received a Presidential Unit Citation. The citation detailed a relentless pursuit, daring penetration of escorts, and 6 torpedoes striking an extremely vital enemy ship. The number of torpedo hits was off by 2, but the Navy did not amend the citation. It was close enough. Enright returned to sea in January 1945 for Archerfish S-6 patrol, commanding a wolf pack in the South China Sea. On February 14th, he attacked what he believed was a Japanese submarine, but the target submerged before visual confirmation. Torpedoes were fired, a claim made, but post-war records could not confirm a sinking. The 6th patrol ended on March 3rd, 3 days early, due to mechanical problems with the forward diving planes. Archerfish returned to Pearl Harbor for repairs. Joseph Enright was promoted to commander and reassigned to staff duties. His time as a submarine captain concluded. Archerfish continued operations under a new commander, surviving the war. Decommissioned in June 1946, she was recommissioned in March 1952 for Cold War service, then decommissioned again in October 1955. A second recommissioning in August 1957 reclassified her as an auxiliary submarine. Her final decommissioning came in May 1968. On October 19, 1968, Archerfish was sunk as a target by USS Snook off the California coast. The submarine that sank the largest warship in history became target practice. Enright's career continued after the war. He commanded Submarine Division 31, USS Fulton, and Submarine Squadron 8 through the 1950s. He served as Chief of Staff for the submarine force of a U.S. Atlantic Fleet and commanded USS Boston before retiring in 1963 as a captain. Post-retirement, he worked for Northrop Corporation on the Omega navigation system, living quietly in Fairfax, Virginia. He rarely spoke publicly about Shinano in the immediate post-war years. The Navy had not officially confirmed the carrier's identity. His official record noted the sinking of a 28,000-ton carrier, type unknown. That changed in 1949. American occupation forces in Japan gained access to Imperial Japanese Navy records, which detailed every warship commissioned by Japan during the war. One entry stood out: Shinano, aircraft carrier, hull 110, commissioned November 19, 1944, sunk November 29, 1944, at coordinates matching Enright's attack by an American submarine. Displacement: 72,000 long tons. The position, date, and cause all aligned. Enright had not sunk a 28,000-ton carrier. He had sunk a 72,000-ton supercarrier, the largest warship afloat at the time. Naval intelligence revised Enright's combat record. The carrier designation changed from Hayataka class to Shinano. The tonnage estimate changed from 28,000 to 72,000. Enright's achievement became official. He had sunk the largest warship ever destroyed by a submarine, a record that stands today, 80 years later. His Navy Cross citation was never amended, the original text remaining in his file, but the true scope of his accomplishment was now recognized by naval historians and submarine veterans. He had accomplished what no other submarine commander had achieved before or since. In 1987, Enright published his memoir, Shinano, The Sinking of Japan's Secret Supership, co-written with naval historian Robert Underbrink. The book detailed the patrol, including transcripts from Archer Fish's report, interviews with surviving crew, and analysis of captured Japanese records. He described the moment the first torpedo hit. "I saw a huge fireball erupt near the stern of the target. Then we heard the noise of the first hit carried to us through the water. 'Got them!' I yelled. As I continued to peer into the periscope, I saw the second explosion rip the target's hull 8 seconds later. Yahoo, I cried to myself." The book became required reading at the Naval Submarine School in Groton, Connecticut. Submarine officers studied his tactics, his patience during the 6-hour surface chase, his calculated risk of firing shallow-running torpedoes, his dive to 400 feet to evade depth charges. The patrol became a textbook example of aggressive tracking, calculated risk, and disciplined execution. Enright's redemption was complete. The officer who had sought relief after failing to sink Shokaku had destroyed the world's largest warship 11 months later. The lessons from Dace: do not hesitate, trust instincts, do not follow doctrine when it fails the situation, were applied to Archer Fish. The shallow torpedoes violated procedure, yet they worked. The 400-foot dive risked crushing the submarine, yet saved them. Joseph Enright died on July 20th, 2000, at his home in Fairfax, Virginia, at 89 years old. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors, attended by submarine veterans from across the country. The eulogy noted his service, his achievements, his redemption. His widow donated his Navy Cross and Presidential Unit citation to the Naval Submarine Museum in Groton. The medals are displayed alongside Archer Fish's battle flag, photographs from the 5th War Patrol, and Enright's sketches of Shinano. This patrol demonstrated that a submarine captain who had failed once could succeed when given a second chance. It showed that patience and calculation could defeat sheer size and armor. Shinano remains on the ocean floor, 65 miles southeast of Cape Shirano. Japanese maritime law prohibits diving. On war graves, sonar scans in 1978 confirmed the wreck's position in approximately 4,000 meters of water. The hull is inverted, flight deck resting on the seabed. 1,435 men are entombed inside. The 3 destroyer escorts that rescued survivors, *Isokase*, *Yukikaze*, and *Kamikaze*, met different fates. Isokase and Kamikaze were sunk by American carrier aircraft on April 7, 1945, during the Battle of Okinawa. Yukikaze survived the war, transferred to the Republic of China Navy, served until 1966, and was scrapped in 1969. Archer Fish's crew remained in contact after the war, holding reunions every 5 years. Enright attended every reunion until his death. By 2010, most of the crew had passed. The last surviving member of the 5th War Patrol died in 2015. The story persists through written records, Enright's memoir, and the patrol report filed in December 1944. The USS Archerfish Association continues to maintain the submarine's history, preserving documents, photographs, and artifacts, conducting outreach to schools and museums, ensuring that what happened on November 29, 1944, is not forgotten. A crew of 81 men tracked a Japanese task force for 6 hours, maneuvered into attack position, fired 6 torpedoes, and sank the largest warship ever built. The action took less than 1 minute. Its consequences resonated for 72 years. Shinano was Japan's last hope for carrier superiority in the Pacific. Her loss eliminated any possibility of challenging American carrier task forces. Japan's carrier fleet was finished. The kamikaze campaign would continue, but without carrier support. The war's outcome was no longer in doubt. Only its duration remained uncertain. Shinano's sinking did not end the war, but it shortened it. Every day the war continued. Thousands died. Every week, cities burned. Shortening the war by even a single week saved thousands of lives. Enright's patrol on Archerfish contributed to that outcome. Not directly, not dramatically, but measurably. 1 submarine, 6 torpedoes for hits. The largest warship ever sunk by a submarine.